Program channel under Title 17 UFC.
That's 100 for me. How about you guys? Hey, that better not be true. I was looking forward to going ape on their asses. Fine, whatever. I'll ease up, I guess.
Okay, that's Genesis. Yeah, under Title 17 UFC Section 107. Allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news report, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright status that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Enjoy.
Attain global centralized control at the expense of the individual. So I want you to keep that in mind as I speak today, because people are going to wonder about my credibility, and people are going to wonder about the credibility of the abductees in my labs who share their information with me. And yet, for many years, these same people who are questioning the credibility of myself and my colleagues have bought into the lies of the establishment, have bought into the lies of the scientific community. And nowhere is that more prevalent than in the UFO field. For example, today is the age of the camcorder. You can't very well debunk and mock and ridicule a camcorder. So what happens? These experts in the aerospace field pop up like so many pieces of feces which refuses they flushed. They pop up and they say, oh, well, that's just the stealth craft. And the dumb, ignorant audience, national television audience, nods their head dumbly, yeah, stealth. But stealth, folks, has nothing to do with the visual spectrum. Stealth has everything to do with what's known as the radar cross-section, RCS, of a craft, utilizing certain composite materials, designing the craft in such a way so there's no right angles to reflect back radar signals. The radar cross-section can be reduced to such an extent that for all intents and purposes it is invisible to radar. Not entirely invisible, but small enough to thwart any attempt at ground control intercept radar stations, airborne radar lock-on platforms to lock on to the craft. So when people say, well, oh, that video shows like a stealth aircraft, that's just another lie. And they can only get away with that because the general public is ignorant about such issues. If it was a stealth aircraft, what is it doing lighting up the whole countryside? Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of stealth? I mean, think about it. It defeats the whole purpose of stealth. Now, and unless you're talking about the invisible jumbo jet in fact in the Pentagon, that was equipped with a Romulan cloaking device. But the thing is, you always have these chills, and there's some here at this conference, UFO debunkers. Now, you can always tell who a UFO debunker is. Essentially a paid government liar. How do you know? Well, rule number one in counterintelligence psychological warfare operations is you have to have a plausible reason for being someplace. And by its very nature, a UFO debunker is an overt deniable asset of the U.S. government or some other government. But they have to have an explanation for being somewhere. It's like in overseas operations. A person may have the cover of Agency for International Development. They can have the cover of a foreign service worker. They can have the cover of a relief worker. A UFO debunker doesn't have a reason for being They don't have a reason why on the pretty websites they have nothing but articles debunking alien abduction, debunking UFO subject in general. Just keep all this in mind. I have to decrease this because there's some people out there that still hang on to this notion that people with PhDs and other letters after their name are somehow more credible than people who don't have letters after their name. So now that I got that out of the way, you're probably wondering who I am. My name is James Bartley, and I've had somewhat of an eclectic background in the telecommunications field and insurance industry. I spent a number of years as a civilian working in an intelligence-related capacity for the Department of the Navy, in particular Naval Air Forces. My rather innocuous title was that of database coordinator. I worked in communications. One of the things that always struck me as humorous is all these experts with magnifying glasses poring over alleged official government documents. They're saying, well, you know, the comp is out of place, so, well, the font is not right. Well, I really can't comment on how the formatting was years ago, but I know that today, really, some of the official messages you will read from commands can be as breezy and as irreverent as a media. They don't necessarily follow a particular standard. Now, what did I do? Well, I really can't elaborate on what I did in communications because the powers that be are bound and determined to go to war with China and God knows how many other things. But I will say that probably more than most in the intelligence community, I had extreme exposure to intelligence summaries from a multitude of intelligence agencies. Ones that you're familiar with, maybe not so familiar with. Also, R&D centers like the Army's Missile Development Center, Redstone Arsenal, various intelligence sections of various commands, theater-level commands, Army-level commands, Air Force commands. When you're in communication, you are smack dab in the middle of just an astounding stream of intelligence-related. Much of it really doesn't get classified out. On a daily basis, I interact with numbers of naval intelligence and naval security group, which is Naval Security Group or NAVSEC, naval subsidiary of the National Security Agency. I was responsible for creating entire streams of classified and unclassified message traffic, what are known as AGS, AIGS, addressed indicator groups. Let me make one up. AG 555, it could be about aircraft maintenance. I was also responsible for creating what are known as CADs, collective address designators. Now let me make one up. NASCAR. Anybody that had an interest in NASCAR, from a crew standpoint, driver standpoint, or a racetrack standpoint, were all action or info addressees on these types of messages. Not only was I a member involved in communications, but I was the go-to guy in the command. If somebody in anti-submarine warfare needed a certain type of message traffic, they came to me. If somebody involved in electronic countermeasures, flying around in the EAB prowlers, they came to me. If somebody that worked at a contractor working at one of the power propulsion desk, whether it's contractors from Pratt & Whitney, General Electric, what have you, they came to me. They came to me with the types of messages they needed to see. And I manipulated the database to ensure that they got those messages and nothing else. Nobody wants to see message traffic that's unrelated to their activity. I had carte blanche to visit any communications station, either onshore or our particular interest was with the carrier battle groups as well as the affiliated naval air stations. I would have been the go-to guy. I would have been in charge of running a standalone communication system for our three-star admiral, what's known as a type command, our three-star admiral, in charge of all naval aviation activities in the Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean and the Pacific. But I chose not to stick around. I resigned. On top of that, I'm a student of military history with an emphasis on intelligence, counterintelligence, and special operations. I'm also a student of the American Civil War. So, unlike most people in the military, who I find to be astonishingly ignorant about the history of this country and the history of even their particular military activity, I was sort of well-rounded. I understood the significance of what it was I was reading. I understood the history of what it was I was reading. So that's just a bit about me. And one other thing that you need to know about me is that I am an alien abductee. I've had numerous encounters with reptilians, with what are known as the reptilian greys. You always hear about the ubiquitous gray beings. Well, the beings that I had encounters with in full waking consciousness were what are known as reptilian greys, what the late great Dr. Carla Turner referred to as the chicken claws. They don't have a long finger and a long nail, they just have claws. When you wake up, and then you find yourself surrounded by three of these things with claws that are looking down at you, believe me, that can be a pretty traumatic experience. So I know wherein I speak. When I speak about alien abduction, and in particular encounters of reptilians, I can develop an instant kinship and understanding with others who have experienced the same things. My colleagues and I have always taken the approach of being friends first, researchers later, because people will only open up to you if they know that you have a vested emotional interest in them. Too often, researchers use the information from an abductee or someone who's had anomalous experiences, and then after their book is written, they discard them to baggage. But we don't do that. What we do is we work long-term with people we're involved with. My mentor is Barbara Bartlett, in my opinion, the greatest alien abduction researcher on this planet. She has had a number of proteges, some of whom you have heard of, the late great Dr. Carla Turner, Candies, who were friends. Jim Walden, he co-wrote a book with Barbara Bartlett. Substantially, but he writes about his own experiences as, for all intents and purposes, a host of a reptilian entity, an interdimensional reptilian entity, which I will explain the mechanics behind that in a moment. Eve Lorgan, Evelyn Lorgan, is a close colleague of mine who has studied at the feet of Barbara Bartlett, in particular the subject of what is known as the alien love bite. Now, this may seem somewhat comical to those who don't know any better, and I will elaborate on this more, but we are emitters, we are resonators. And what some of these negative beings strive to do is engender negative emotions, pain, misery, or isolation. What the alien love bite is it's a setting up of a love bonding drama between two abductees, oftentimes bonded from childhood, where they're abducted and re-abducted, and as they grow older, oftentimes not knowing the existence of the other, they've already developed strong astral connections and strong subconscious connections. And then decades later, Jack and Jill, let's say, Eve had a UFO conflict, very common, and then instant chemistry, instant bond between them develops, where they feel that they had sexual relations with one another, they had extreme close by, like chemical reactions with one another, they begin to psychically develop communication with each other. And then one of the outcomes of that is that an emotional unplugging occurs where one is left in an unrequited state because they can't consummate the relationship because they may be married. But the bottom line, the reason for this is gender. Extreme emotions of misery, unhappiness, unrequited love. And these beings, they feed off that. They feed off that in a way you or I nurture ourselves on food or protein, what have you. These beings literally strive to create negative situations in our life for a number of reasons, but mostly to feed off of us. Now, there are 4 subjects I will discuss today. In general, I'm here to talk about the reptilian overlordship. The reptilian overlordship, the proof of which is all around us. Global institutionalized sex slavery, the wars and the rumors of wars, the designer plagues. All of these things are part and parcel of the rapidly advancing movement towards global centralized control, the privatization of water, genetically modified foods. All these things are part and parcel of the reptilian overlordship. They're around us. We see this all the time. And people just don't realize that there is a controlling factor behind all of it. The tendency on the part of some conspiracy researchers is to ascribe all of these activities on the part of power-mad bankers, power-mad humans. But I promise you that not only the conception but the execution of this advanced globalized, centralized agenda was thousands of years in the making. Purely human consciousness cannot conceive of, let alone affect these changes. Because if you have any understanding of metaphysics at all, you will know that everything manifests first in the spiritual realms before they manifest in the physical. That's just the way it is. It's simple thought followed by action. It's one very basic example. How else is the reptilian overlordship manifested? Vulgarity, extreme vulgarity. Movies like Jackass, kids, all these efforts at promoting vulgarity as the norm in our society. The occultic symbology. My friend Jordan Maxwell out there in the convention hall, he is the foremost expert on the occultic symbology. He's had his information borrowed and stolen constantly. In fact, the Tom Hanks character in the movie Da Vinci Code is a imitation of Jordan Maxwell. And you see the symbology when you walk down the aisle of the supermarket. Every time you see a obelisk, you're looking at a representation of reptilian phalanx. In other words, you're just sticking to it. You don't even realize it's there in front of you. Okay? That's the reptilian overlordship in a nutshell, which I'll elaborate on more later. The four aspects of reptilian overlordship I will talk about are: 1, reptilians and modus operandi; 2, hybrid hosting process, which is the fundamental building block, fundamental basis for the reptilian overlordship; 3, MILABs, which are legitimate alien abductions that have been utilized by deep black elements of the military intelligence community as covert operatives because of innate abilities they have, physical abilities. All abductees are part of a particular bloodlines, and any of these MILABs have latent paraphysical capabilities precisely because they've been utilized and genetically modified and upgraded, if you will, by various assemblies of each particular reptilian. And the fourth thing I will talk about, I will tie up all this subjects together. Now, the first thing I will talk about is the reptilians. There are essentially two types of reptilians. There's the spacefaring reptilians, literally fly around in spaceships. And then there are what's been described as the interterrestrials that live within the Earth, that are essentially native to this planet, been here as long as we're longer than we have. And these beings develop over time interdimensional capability. They are masters of frequency and resonance. They call their density. The reptilians have attained control of the surface through a mastery of genetics, through control of the human gene pool, modifying the human race in general, and particular bloodlines in particular, to the point where they develop attributes, behaviors, capabilities which advance the reptilian agenda on the surface. The reptilians come in a number of different shapes and sizes. Some are rather small, 4.5 to 5 feet tall. More commonly, they're 6 feet tall and taller. Some as high as 7.5 feet tall. They can be a number of colors, like dark blue, brownish, what's been described as sea. There's a particular type of reptilian species referred to as the yellow bellies. There are many reptile-type species on the surface, like crocodiles and alligators that have a tannish or whitish underside. There are literally reptilians that have a whitish or a tannish underside. We call them yellow-bellied. And these reptilians, over time, have developed the ability to, like I said, they can alter their density. Now, how do they interact with humans? Because Nibiru may be a craft, right? And they have to be at least a level 3 type of civilization, where they got their own portable sun wherever they go. I mean, they're very high up there as far as hierarchy and as far as power throughout the cosmos. I would agree with that. But as far as like virtually every deity being another name for an Anunnaki, I'm not too sure about that. That much being said, I do believe that the Nephilim, at least as described in whether it was Genesis and some of the other texts, that I believe that, yes, it's quite possible that it was the Anunnaki with their not only genetic engineering and splicing their DNA with perhaps a hominoid, as Lloyd Pye calls it. That's another great video people need to watch. It is Everything You Know Is Wrong by the late great Lloyd Pye.
It's fantastic.
See this on YouTube, where he goes into detail about how Anunnaki did all this, basing it on the biological genetic evidence. And so, by either genetic means or through mating, and I think eventually they were able to create these genetic hybrids that were compatible as far as mating purposes were concerned. They did create this subclass, this hybrid race of Nephilim, for lack of a better term, that had a lot of their attributes. They had their longevity, that lived for, like Noah, for example, Methuselah, Enoch. I mean, these guys hung around for a long time. Yeah. And they had these powers and metaphysical attributes. They were kind of installed, many of them, as the elite ruling class above when the Anunnaki were away, or when the Anunnaki needed someone to rule on their behalf when they were like warring against each other or elsewhere. So I believe that the Nephilim can be regarded as the offspring, if you will, of the Anunnaki, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's just another term for it, but the stories are all too similar, and they're obviously happening based on who's telling them from what culture, right? So that's the only difference I'm seeing.
Yes, the cultural interpretation and whatever spin the gods, if you will, gave to that particular culture, right? That made sense to and was easily assimilated by said culture. Now, the one thing I want to talk about before we run out of time is there is something to be said about giants, right? In fact, Joseph Burrell has got a book called "If Memory Serves: Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men." It's a very good book, and there are other people that wrote books about giants, and the Native American lore, to just cite one example, throughout virtually all Native American tribes, is that there were giants. That there was a time when and the stories vary, but they're along these lines that when the Native Americans went to a certain part of the country, they stumbled upon these giants, and these giants, some of them were, you can't really say they're cannibalistic because they're eating humans, smaller than them, right? Get in my belly kind of thing, right? So that is and a lot of the tribal elders and a lot of the Native Americans still don't like to talk about this whole concept of giants. It's still troubling to them. It's within their genetic memory. There's a recent book written by a former pilot in the Royal Australian Air Force, Marius Boyaran, I think his name is, and he wrote a book called Solomon Islands Mysteries, Giants and UFOs in the Solomon Islands, or something like that. And he went there. His wife is a Solomon Islander, and he went to the Solomon Islands. This is northwest of Australia. It's where the U.S. and the Japanese engaged in a series of battles there, 1942 and on. and they talk to the locals, and it's well known within the locals, and even like a governor of one of the islands had seen eyewitness testimony, seen a giant, a very tall giant, and it was rampaging, and they barely got away with their life. These giants are not only cannibalistic from a human perspective, they prey on humans, and they've been doing this for as long as the islanders remember. It's possible that they get from one island to another through subterranean underwater tunnel systems. Systems. There's also well-established, well-known UFO bases there, and there's also mineral issues there too, which Marius Boyaran talked about as far as certain types of minerals, which the powers that be are very interested in. And so these giants, they tend to be of the hairy giant humanoid, as Lloyd Pye would call them, variety, but they can be quite large too. And like in Australia, a name that some of the Aboriginal tribes have, or at least one of the Aboriginal tribes have for a certain type of giant, translated comes out as taller than the tallest gum tree. And if
headed by Yahushua, who you call Jesus Christ. God is in the middle. God controls both sides. He sent the evil angels to go out and do his work. So when it says that God killed the firstborn of Egypt, or when God does any of the killing, God is not the one who comes down and does it himself. He sends the evil angels to go and do his bidding. 1 Samuel 16 and verse 14. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul. See, Saul had a righteous spirit at first. He had a spirit of the Most High. And an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. The Most High took that spirit from him and replaced it with an evil spirit. Had him trying to kill King David. When David he wasn't king at the time, but trying to kill David, his servant. And David wasn't doing anything to him. But an evil spirit from God troubled him.
So, well, physically speaking, he was completely healthy, but his brain waves are off. Nothing but a nice. Hold on, I'll look in the capsule. That's not. It's a dream. It's different. It felt so real. My head won't believe it. What's that here? Seem to be having nightmares. Okay. Yeah. I'm still better than guys like you. We're a clone of the others. They were dispatched to planet Meat with the orders of Lord Freeze. Damn it. Can't believe they left me behind.
Black history. According to the public school system, Negroes were brought to America in 16...
out that's taller than the tallest gum tree. And if someone just, goes online and looks at a picture of a gum tree, that's pretty tall indeed, 30, 40 feet or higher, right? And so we're not just talking about 10, 12, 15 foot tall giants. We're talking about bloody
giants. Yeah,
giants.
Really serious giants.
And what should be borne out is that some of these giants may have come from a planet originally where the gravitational pull of the planet, whatever the case may be, different from Earth. So, it allowed them to grow to such a huge size. Then you look at our own paleo ancient history, the animals, the flora and fauna tended to be humongous. When the mammals came along after the dinosaurs, they were like gigantic, what we would call rhinos, or gigantic, different types of animals, but they were mammals, but they were just huge. And that was the case for the dinosaurs, and that was the case for some of the animals in the oceans. Everything was like there was an ancient, they were giant. There was an ancient a scorpion, a sea scorpion that was like 9 feet long or something like that. So it's in the fossil record for giants, and also the fact that the Smithsonian has been hoarding, among other agencies, I would assume, has been hoarding all these giants. And what these people, they can't see the forest for the trees. There's not this proliferation of legitimate giant photos, skeleton photos out there, unless someone happened to get into a secret wing of the Smithsonian and take a photo, right? So when people make a photo and they Photoshop and they create like an image of a large a skeleton, that's not the point of the picture. The point of the picture is the accompanying article about the fact that there have been giants and skeletons and all this all along. People look at the photo and go, Photoshop. They start bleeding like a sheep. They start chirping like some, bird that's been hit on the head with a rock. That's not what's important. What's important is the article. We're not having photos, real photos of giant skeletons falling out of the sky. So, these people who write these articles, they go with what they got, okay? I don't begrudge them for that. If someone wanted to say, that, photo was Photoshop, but yes, I do believe that giants may have existed in the past. I don't have qualms about that. But when they, make this blanket statement that, it's all unbelievable, more nonsense, they're throwing
the baby out with
the bathwater. And it must be understood that, again, we only can go by the distorted information handed down throughout the ages. Okay, we're told that, for example, and I'm not saying this is exactly the case, but there might be something to it. We're told that the Titans were of necessity bad because Kronos, i.e. Saturn, wanted to eat Zeus and all of Zeus's siblings, and then Zeus managed to, with the help of his mother, Rhea, substituted like big stones in place of the children, and then they fooled them, and then these children grew up to be the Olympian gods, who eventually, and this also parallels stories around the world where humans battled the giants for control, for hegemony, where even the Native American tribes in their lore, they talk about long ago, it was a fight for survival between them and the giants. And Joseph Burrell talks about this in his book. And there are other books that talk about this, where it was either them or us kind of mentality, where if we didn't get rid of these giants, they're going to eat us all up kind of thing, right? I mean, see the Solomon Islands. So, but what if these Titans were not so bad from, say, even our perspective? Well, let's say that the Olympian gods in that story were just the Anunnaki by a different name, right?
Okay.
So who was it that the Anunnaki overthrew, or at least dispersed, or maybe even put in stasis? I mean, the possibilities are endless. Who was it that they displaced in order to assert or try to assert control in our solar system? I'd like to know that, because there's a knee-jerk response once again is, okay, I believe in giants, but they must all of necessity be bad. Well, maybe not necessarily.
No.
So we have to keep an open mind about this. We can't let these biases from all these distorted and deliberately misrepresented ancient texts, patriarchal, most of them, cloud our reasoning. We have to go by our inner, in final analysis, we have to go by our inner guidance and intuitive guidance.
And a little common sense. So,
yeah, a little common sense.
Okay. Well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's my opinion, just as for a last little opinion, that Nibiru is a crap. That's just my opinion.
Yes, thank you.
Why I have come to that, I don't know, but it's the whole slew of information that I've been getting over the years. But that's my opinion, and it comes with its own little entourage of beings, perhaps entities, servants, whatever you name it. But Ari, we wanted to touch on something that you talked about earlier. There was some information.
What?
I come from a world far from. I have journeyed across an ocean of stars. For some time, your world has sheltered my devices. For reasons unknown, he has chosen to keep his existence from you. He will have made efforts to blend in. He will look like you, but he is not one of you.
The giants of Solomon Islands are the hidden UFO bases for the greatest anthropological and scientific discoveries in modern manuals. Welcome to the SolomonGiants.com. Contained in this website is extraordinary information that brings to the forefront worldwide issues that have been tormenting intellectuals for centuries. It is about two phenomenal discoveries that I have found existing in this universe, and this website is a further attempt once again to bring them to the attention of modern world. The first discovery is about how the people of the Solomon Islands have shared their islands were previously undiscovered to modern world, races of humans for millennia right to this very present day. For a variety of reasons explained, this has not been known by the rest of the world until now. The second discovery is about the whereabouts of hidden UFO bases that have existed in the Solomon Islands, quite possibly at the same time. There seems to be a link between the giants and the making the Solomon Islands their